Sunshine, blue skies, please go away. Ooh, you're clinging to me tighter than you ever have before.
I understand he was out in California, out in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, but he was begging, you know, and the guys give him a little bit of money just to get rid of him.
David Ruffin had that once-in-a-lifetime talent, the voice, the swagger, the energy to own any stage. But offstage, it was a whole different story. Fame, drama, and bad decisions followed him everywhere, and no amount of talent could keep him from crashing. His life wasn't just about the music, it was a mix of brilliance, chaos, and a whole lot of trouble.
Alcohol and all types of drugs were just a part of the David Ruffin lifestyle.
David didn't just think he was the star of the Temptations. He acted like the whole group revolved around him. The attitude, the drama, the messy love life, he had it all. And when he wasn't tearing up the stage, he was burning bridges. He'd crash Temptations performances like they owed him something. And his relationship with Tammy Terrell, a nightmare behind closed doors. The charm that made fans fall in love with him wasn't enough to hide the damage he left behind. His life was one big storm, and he was right at the center of it.
He had all kind of extremes. Good guy, believe me, excellent guy when he wasn't in one of those extremes.
This was the rise and fall of David Ruffin, the man who could have had it all but let it slip through his fingers one bad decision at a time.
Tones. Me and Marvin used to pack records for Anna Records. My first record was on Vega Records with Tommy Smalls.
David Ruffin came from a tiny spot in Mississippi called Wynot. Yes, that's actually the name. Life there was quiet, but for him, it was anything but. Born into a family that didn't play around when it came to faith, hard work, and music, he grew up surrounded by all three. His dad, Eli, preached, his mom, Ophelia, kept things running at home, and he had three siblings, Rita Mae, Quincy, and Jimmy. There was also another sister, Rosine, but she didn't make it past infancy, which hit the family hard. His roots ran deep in the South, and survival meant grinding every single day. His father juggled preaching with trucking jobs at lumber mills, but when it came to his kids, especially David and Jimmy, it was all about discipline and music, and not the gentle kind. The expectations were sky high, and the method, let's just say it was rough.
And I used to work for Pop Gordy, Barry's father, and physically labor, I have built Motown with my hands. Yeah.
The biggest heartbreak came early. When David was just a baby, his mom passed away after giving birth. Losing a parent that young changed everything, but his dad remarried soon after to a school teacher named Erlene, who stepped in to help raise him and his siblings. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave them someone to lean on. Music wasn't just background noise in David's life, it was the whole atmosphere. His dad and stepmom ran a family gospel group, dragging the kids from church to church, turning every gathering into a stage. But for David, singing wasn't always about passion. With a father who ruled with a heavy hand, it felt more like a job he had to get right. Winning his approval meant hitting every note perfectly, no excuses.
Sunshine, blue skies, please go away.
Even with the pressure, he and Jimmy leaned into their talent. Church choirs, local talent shows. David was out there, turning heads with that voice. But sticking around wasn't in his plans. At just 14, he packed up and took off, chasing something bigger. Coming from a family that took faith seriously, he originally landed in Memphis under the watch of a minister named Eddie Bush, thinking he'd become a preacher. But life had other plans, and soon enough, music pulled him in a completely different direction. Barely a teenager, David made his way to Hot Springs, Arkansas, where he ended up running into jazz musician Phineas Newborn Sr. At this point, he started going by Little David Bush, borrowing his guardian's last name like a stage alias. He kept himself busy, hopping into talent shows, picking up gigs, and even working with horses at a jockey club to get by.
That's when I used to have to walk Melvin Franklin home.
Music kept pulling him in, and soon he was part of a gospel group called the Dixie Nightingales. That opened the door to an even bigger opportunity, getting to sing with the Soul Stirrers, the same group that once had Johnny Taylor in the lineup. The deeper he got into the music scene, the more he looked up to artists like Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson, who had cracked the code on breaking out of gospel and making it big in mainstream music. David wasn't about to stay in the gospel lane forever. Watching guys like Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson switch it up and blow up, he figured, why not him too? With Eddie Bush and his wife, Dorothy Helen, backing him, he made his way to Detroit, where his older brother Jimmy was already juggling music and a day job at Ford. If there was ever a place to chase a dream, this was it. The city was alive with possibilities, especially for anyone trying to make it in music. But the real twist? A random gig landed him in the orbit of Berry Gordy Jr. Before Gordy was the music mogul everyone knew, he was just a guy with big ambitions.
And Berry started Motown, and Billy Davis and Anna Gordy was Anna Records.
His dad ran a contracting business and hired David to help build what would eventually become Hitsville, USA, the future home of Motown.
Sunshine, blue skies, please go away.
David Ruffin wasn't about to let an opportunity pass him by. His brother Jimmy, already running in Motown circles, caught wind that the Temptations needed a new member and immediately threw David's name in the mix. David didn't hesitate. He went straight to Otis Williams and made it clear he was ready to slide in. At first, he was just another voice in the background. Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams were handling most of the lead vocals, and the label wasn't exactly jumping at the chance to push David forward. Even when he did record, they weren't convinced he had what it took to be front and center. Then came New Year's Eve. One performance was all it took to flip the script. Suddenly, he was in the studio with the group, but the hesitation from the label still lingered until Smokey Robinson caught wind of him. Smokey Robinson heard something different in David's voice, gritty but smooth, raw but polished, like it had been through something but still had a little shine. He knew David needed the perfect song to match that energy, so he got to work. That song ended up changing everything. My Girl wasn't just a hit, it was the song. The Temptations shot straight to the top, and suddenly, David wasn't just another member, he was the group. But while everything looked golden on stage, behind the scenes, it was a different story. The fame, the fast life, all of it started weighing on him.
Okay, my question is to Otis. Why was David Ruffin fired from the Temptations?
The drug use that hadn't been a big deal before, it started creeping in. At first, people brushed it off, but then the changes got harder to ignore. He was losing weight, his energy well, and the people around him could see something wasn't right. He started skipping rehearsals, missing shows, and making moves that weren't sitting well with the rest of the group. That's when the battle for control kicked off. Diana Ross had just secured the spotlight with the Supremes, and David wanted the same deal. He was set on making it David Ruffin and the Temptations, but Otis Williams wasn't going for it. That only made things messier. On top of that, David started asking way too many questions about the group's money, where it was going, who was getting what. That didn't sit well with Berry Gordy, and if there was one person you didn't want to rub the wrong way, it was him. Then came the move that sealed his fate. Instead of showing up for a concert in Cleveland, David ditched to go watch his girlfriend perform. That was it. The group was done.
Well, you see, when we first started out, we made a vow that we would not change, because we had heard about Frankie Lyman leaving the Teenagers and Tony Williams leaving the Platters, so we made a vow.
They dropped him and already had Dennis Edwards lined up to take over. But David wasn't about to just step aside and let that happen.
But it's one thing to hold true to that vow once, you start to make huge amounts of money and doors open up to you that once would never. And, you're getting all kind of adulation, and success can act as a very strong aphrodisiac.
David went full chaos mode. He started crashing the Temptations shows like he still had a spot in the group. The second My Girl kicked off, he'd strut right onto the stage, snatch the mic, and steal the moment. The crowd ate it up. Security? Not so much. The group was over it. But behind the scenes, there was still talk of letting him back in. Fans wanted him, and even the group couldn't deny his star power. But when they finally gave him a shot at an official comeback, he blew it. Showed up late like it was no big deal. That was the last straw. They locked in Dennis for good, and David was officially out. David's problems didn't stop when the music did. Drugs had him stuck in a cycle, rehab stints that never really took, court cases stacking up, and run-ins with the law that ranged from party drama to tax messes to getting busted with a stolen gun. A judge tried to keep him in check with probation and community service, but he kept breaking the rules. Eventually, they shipped him off to a rehab program in New York. Even when he linked up with other artists later on, the past still had its claws in him. When Otis Williams ran into him backstage one last time, the damage was impossible to miss. The years had worn him down. That voice, the one that made history, hadn't lost its magic, but everything else had caught up to him. Speaking of girlfriends and relationships, David M. wasn't doing so well in that department either. Tammy's love life was a never-ending heartbreak playlist. She barely made it out of a toxic mess with James Brown before landing in another one, this time with David Ruffin. He had the charm, the swagger, the golden voice, and way too many red flags. She fell for him just like everyone else did, but behind the scenes, things got dark fast. By the time she hit 20, she had her own hit song and was stepping into the spotlight. Rolling with the Motown, Review put her next to music's biggest names, and that's when she and David got close. He was a star, sharp dresser, smooth talker, and impossible to ignore. Women were all over him, and she was no exception. When they got together, it felt like a dream, but dreams don't last. David pulled out all the stops for a flashy, unexpected proposal, and Tammy was so caught up in the moment that she announced their engagement right there on stage. But that high didn't last. Not long after she found out the ugly truth, he was already married, and if that wasn't bad enough, he had 3 kids and another girlfriend in Detroit. Just like that, the fairy tale crumbled. Things spiraled fast. His drug habit was getting worse. Their arguments got louder, and it wasn't just words being thrown. The worst of it happened in 1967, when, after a blowout fight, he hit her in the head with his motorcycle helmet. Some even said it was a hammer, but no one could prove it. Either way, that was it for her. She walked away and never looked back. Even after she cut ties with David, Tammy's health kept going downhill. She had dealt with migraines her whole life, but she was convinced all the stress from that relationship made them unbearable. Then things took a scary turn. She collapsed in the middle of a performance. That's when doctors found out she had a brain tumor. She went through surgery after surgery, but nothing helped. Her body just kept getting weaker. By the time the new decade rolled around, she was in a wheelchair, her hair was gone, her vision had faded, and she barely had any strength left. After one last operation, she slipped into a coma. A few weeks later, she was gone. She was only 24. David's love life was just as as the rest of his story. Before Tammy, he was married to Sandra Barnes, and they had 3 daughters together. Later, he had a son with his longtime girlfriend, Jenna Sapia. They were never officially married, but they lived together for years, and after he was gone, she legally took his last name. Years later, she put it all in a book, laying out the cheating, the chaos, and the darker side of their relationship.
You're clinging to me tighter than you ever have before.
David thought he was about to level up, but breaking away wasn't so simple. He wanted to take charge, especially when it came to his bank account, but Motown had no plans of letting him dip. He lawyered up to fight for his freedom, but the label wasn't budging. In the end, he had to write out his contract whether he liked it or not.
Breaks my heart.
To make things even messier, when he first signed with Motown, he was already locked into a solo deal. That little detail didn't exactly sit well with the rest of the Temptations. When he finally got to go solo, he kicked things off with a track that was originally meant for the group. Didn't matter. He made it his own, and it took off. He dropped an album right after, then got to work on another one. But Motown hit the brakes and shoved it in a vault, leaving it untouched until long after he was gone. David teamed up with his brother Jimmy for an album, putting out a few tracks that got some attention, but nothing that set the world on fire. He kept pushing with another solo album, but by then, things weren't looking as bright. His last big moment came with Walk Away from Love, a breakup anthem that had people feeling some type of way. It blew up, sold over 1 million copies, and earned him a gold record. But after that, the momentum started fading. Once he wrapped things up with Motown, he jumped over to Warner Brothers, hoping for a fresh start. He put out 2 albums, but neither made much noise. David linked back up with Eddie Kendricks, his old Temptations bandmate, and the two got back in the studio and on the road. They even rejoined the Temptations for an album and tour, with Rick James producing a track that actually took off. But things didn't stay smooth for long. David started missing shows, struggling with personal issues. Even after that, he and Kendricks kept performing together. They hit the stage at the Apollo Theater's big reopening, sharing the night with Hall & Oates, and the crowd ate it up. The whole thing was such a moment that it got turned into a live album. Then came Live Aid, where they ran through some Temptations classics and gave the audience a serious throwback. Their impact was undeniable, and they even got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. After that, they hit the road under a new name, reminding everyone why they were icons in the first place.
I understand he was out in California, out in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, but he was begging, and the guys gave him a little bit of money just to get rid of him.
But his struggles never really went away. After wrapping up a big tour in England, he came back to the US, seeming like he was on a better path. Then, out of nowhere, everything took a turn. He was in West Philly when things got out of control. He and a friend reportedly went through a shocking amount of crack cocaine, and it ended in disaster. He collapsed at a drug house, and another friend rushed him to the hospital. By the time doctors tried to save him, it was already too late. He was gone. The official report called it an accidental overdose. But not everyone bought that story. His family and friends had questions, especially when word got out that the money belt he always carried, supposedly with $40,000 inside, had mysteriously disappeared. People couldn't help but wonder if someone had taken advantage of him in his final moments. His girlfriend, Diane Showers, was devastated, but admitted she saw this coming. She had known him for years and had seen how his choices, especially around money, had led him down a dangerous road.
He had all kind of extremes. Good guy, believe me, excellent guy when he wasn't in one of those extremes.
Detroit showed up for him one last time. His funeral was packed with music legends, turning it into both a tribute and a heartbreakingly real goodbye. Stevie Wonder and Aretha Franklin sang, the Temptations honored him with one of their classics, and Michael Jackson even offered to cover the cost. Diana Ross and Rod Stewart sent flowers, adding to the outpouring of love. David was buried in Detroit, where fans still visit to pay respects. His solo career never hit the same heights as his days with the Temptations, but his voice, his impact, that stayed legendary. David Ruffin had everything: crazy talent, stage presence, a voice that could make anybody feel something. But no matter how high he climbed, his demons were right there, pulling him back down. He went from Motown royalty to losing it all, and his story was just as it was legendary. The fame, the music, the downfall, it was all part of the package. So what's the verdict? Was he ahead of his time and misunderstood, or did he set himself up for disaster? Drop a comment and let's talk. And if you're into deep dives on music's biggest legends and their messiest moments, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stick around for more.